It's starting to look like the Georgia Bulldogs might whiff on the nation's #1 recruit. Stick around. I'm going to tell you why this is not necessarily the case, but why it's bad for Alabama. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever the case may be. Welcome to Way Offsides, your favorite sports talk. We're here for you to bring you the latest in everything going on in this wild, crazy world that we call college football. And you know how it is. Once spring ball's over with, there's really not a lot going on until media days. You've got the UFL, baseball, NBA finals, things like that. But ultimately, the biggest thing in the college football world to talk about is recruiting. Well, today's a monumental day for the 2026 class, mainly because the #1 overall recruit, Jackson Cantwell, is set to announce where he will play college football. Now, why is that a big deal? We don't understand what's going on. This has nothing to do with Alabama. Well, it doesn't. Cantwell at one point in time was considering Alabama football, but after the departure of Nick Saban and some changes, not so much. He has visited, but it really came down to a few schools. That would be like Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia was in the mix. But late, out of nowhere, came the Miami Hurricanes. Now, Cantwell has been very, very high on Georgia, I should say. So much so that it looks like a lot of people were starting to feel like he was trending that way. He was just on campus for an official visit where he met with Jared Curtis. They posted on social media, JC to JC, this whole thing. And it felt like Cantwell was going to wind up at Georgia to potentially help Georgia solidify another #1 recruiting class. Well, the 6'8", 316 pound offensive tackle out of Nixa High School in Missouri may not end up at Georgia at all. Now, he is the highest rated recruit in the 2026 class. He's the #1 recruit in the state, the #1 in the nation. He's had offers from Alabama, Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, and Miami. Very cool on Alabama. But I mean, in terms of Alabama, it's not that big of a deal. Alabama's done well recruiting the offensive line. Cantwell would have been a nice cherry on top to their 2026 class, but it's not detrimental to what Alabama's going to put on the field moving forward. Now, before we go any further, I have to say I'm recording this video before his commitment. And in the crazy wild world of recruiting, who knows what can happen? Things change constantly. Like we said, he was heavily favored to Georgia starting off, but at the last minute, it seems like someone has made Cantwell an offer that he could not ignore. And it's starting to feel like the leverage is now in the favor of the University of Miami, one of the biggest NIL players in the sport. Now, On3, a lot of other people, Wilt Fong, all of those guys are now predicting Cantwell to land with Miami. We'll see if Georgia can counter in the allotted time. But I also want to remind you that it's May, right? And this is a verbal commitment. Nobody's signing any papers today. Nobody's showing up to practice today. So who knows actually what could or could not transpire. So sorry, my screen had a little malfunction there for a second. We're good. So who knows really like what could or couldn't happen and transpire in the few months. Now, I think that based off of everything I'm seeing, that Cantwell is probably going to verbally commit to Miami today. Does that mean he winds up at Miami? Possibly. He could. Do I think he's going to play at Georgia ever? Yes, I do. I think his commitment will either flip before National Signing Day or what we used to call National Signing Day. Or he is going to go to Miami, get a bag, and then he's going to transfer. Now, interestingly enough, we all know that Miami's quarterback this season will be Carson Beck, the former Georgia quarterback. So just an interesting parallel there. Doesn't really have an impact on anything. Beck will be gone before Cantwell even gets on campus, I believe. So, no dots connected there. But it's just very interesting. Now, where does Alabama fall into this equation? Well, they don't, because they've been out of the recruitment of Cantwell for a while. But in the bigger picture of things in NIL and the way college football is headed, Alabama fans and Georgia fans are going to have a lot in common when this is all said and done. Let's say Cantwell does go with Miami. It's obvious that Miami has offered him something that he can't ignore, and Georgia may or may not be willing to meet that number. And Alabama fans, I'm already seeing it on social media, and Georgia fans are going to be in the same boat in the sense that you typically don't want a player who is bouncing around for money, a player that is going to commit somewhere because of a paycheck. You don't necessarily want that guy in your locker room. We have seen this at Alabama. I mean, for 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot of trimming of the fat, is the term I like to use, because you had a lot of guys that were me focused. And if a kid's going to commit to a university because of money, then the focus is solely on them and not necessarily the program. And you're also paying him, and you don't know that he's going to be around for another year. You don't know if you're going to get your worth out of that investment that you've made into said player. And I think the powers that be, these big name schools that have had long-term success in winning national championships, Alabama, Georgia, feel very similar, that there's no sense in overpaying for these kids. There's no sense in matching these offers because it's not going to equal long-term success. Yeah, it may win you a national championship, but it's not going to equal a dynasty. Dynasties are dead. The day of dynasties in college football are gone. That's a whole topic we can have for another vehicle. Until NIL gets fixed, until the parameters are put in place, those guardrails that we always talk about, the day of dynasties is done. You're going to be lucky to ever see a team go back to back. It's going to be extremely hard because the wealth is scattered and redistributed after every season now, right? And so, but I feel like Georgia fans and Alabama fans have a lot in common in the sense that if a guy is going to commit somewhere, especially right out of high school, because of money, then it's not necessarily somebody that you want on your roster. It's not somebody you want in your locker room. You could call it toxic. You could call it whatever you want to. But for me personally, I feel like for a college program to remain traditionally good and dominant, and we'll just use Alabama as an example here because traditionally they're good and dominant and one of the blue bloods in college football. For a program to remain and keep that status, you have to have guys that are bought into your program. Terrible verbiage there, but guys that are bought into the philosophy of the program and what it means and the tradition, not just themselves. And assuming, there's a lot of assuming going on in this video, I get that, but we're just talking the talk. Assuming that Cantwell is going to commit to Miami because of money, it's hard when you look at a school like Georgia. I mean, he had Ohio State and Georgia on the board. Ohio State just won one. Georgia's won 2 this decade already. You know, he dropped Alabama out early. Alabama hasn't won one since 2020, but they've been in the running for them. And they've also shown that they have a crazy good track record of putting linemen into the draft. So it's easy to kind of make the inference that he's going to Miami for a paycheck. Miami has no problem. They've got money. They'll pay you this. They'll pay you that. Right. And we've all seen what a number 1 overall recruit can do for a program. Travis Hunter was a great example of that. But I think if you ask the majority of fans what they feel about somebody who's coming to a program strictly because of their NIL check, they don't want it. Fans that are in programs who are held to maybe a higher standard in terms of not just what they're doing on the football field, but their tradition as a whole, they don't want those kids on campus because they understand in the big picture it's toxic to what they're going to be able to do on the football field. You can have a roster full of 5 stars, but if these kids aren't bought into each other and what that coach is selling, they're not going to perform. Alabama last year had one of the best rosters in the country, if not the most talented roster in the country, right? And you had people who weren't bought in. You had people who were bigger than the program, who wanted to be bigger than the program, and it cost them a few games. And you've got people who aren't like that, like Malachi Moore, trying to hold everybody to the same standard. And he can't do that as a leader because you've got a lot of me's in your locker room. That's the problem with what potentially could happen today with Jackson Cantwell if he whiffs the dogs, despite being heavily favored to the Wolf and ends up committing to Miami. Again, just because he commits to Miami today doesn't mean that's where he's going. You know, these guys aren't going to stop recruiting him. And even if he does end up at Miami, who's to say he's not going to go get his check, wait for the portal to open, and jump to where he really wants to be, which I think is Athens. But I don't know. I don't know Cantwell that well. So we'll see. But anyhow, thanks for stopping in. Thanks for tuning in. We've got a ton of videos up for you guys to check out. Just did a video yesterday about Josh Pate's post-spring rankings. Go check that out. It might surprise you, Alabama fans. While you're there, please make sure that you're subscribing, doing all the things. You can follow us on social media as well. We're everywhere. We've actually got somebody working on our Facebook page now to kind of keep that up to date for you. So make sure you go follow us over on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and we also have a website. If you go check out our website, you'll absolutely adore that. We'd love to have you to go check it out. You can check out all of our blog articles. We'll have an article published later today about this very topic. And there's a lot of stuff you're going to see on there that you can't get on the show. A lot of talk, a lot of insider information, things that you're going to want to check out. So thanks for stopping by. We appreciate you being with us. You guys are friggin' fantastic. We absolutely love you. Say your prayers, wash your hands, read your Bibles, horns down, beat Auburn and LSU and Tennessee too. Roll Tide.